So this video is actually on one of the most difficult to speak about subjects or awkward to talk about subjects about spiritual awakening. So it sounds really great to a mind that's suffering that it can go beyond the mind and transcend it. But we all sort of originally have this assumption that we can leave all this sort of like mess of our lives completely behind us. And there is a deep vein of truth to this. And when you contemplate about what focus actually is, and you understand the benefit of focusing what you want and not what you don't want, you see the beauty of this. And yet, paradoxically, nothing is left behind. So I feel like it's incredibly important to talk about this because I wish that I had known this at the time, and it would have saved me a lot of conflict if I'd really understood this. And it's still something to this day that I'm healing. So the mind does not like the idea of things that are messy at all. It likes to avoid it completely. So the mind, it has its own illusion that it can create a sense of order. And so it projects disorder and chaos onto the entire world that's outside of it. So it is the thing that is making order out of everything. And so when we heal this duality, we see that we are the disorder itself. And so all of the disorder and the things that we fear, the things that we want to avoid, sort of come back in like a boomerang. We've rejected them and we've tried to throw them away from us, and they come back and hit us and smack us in the head. And meditation and starting to pay attention to your thoughts, paying attention to how you feel, going for your dreams, going for your life purpose is all this like invitation for this stuff to come back in. And some spiritual teachers talk about this in an incredibly dramatic fashion with incredibly dramatic and scary words. And so it is like everything is collapsing. But I read this line in a Stephen Harrison book and I loved it so much. And it's so true and so important to remember. An awakening is a collapse, but when you're left and you're looking at what's collapsed, nothing has collapsed. You're looking at the collapse. It's the collapse of the collapse. And so it's beyond the duality of order and messiness. And nature is the most fantastic teacher of this. And it came to me yesterday, like the perfect way to sort of frame and to heal this is the teacher of nature itself. And this time of year, the leaves have fallen. They're like no longer pretty. They're just everywhere. It's a total mess. And yet, that is the complete order of the trees, and the nutrients of the leaves will disintegrate into the soil and feed more plants than just the trees themselves that they came from. And so that's a really good metaphor for awakening. So if you look at it from an external point of view, which when I say that, I mean what we project others are thinking of ourselves, because we can never experience that. But also, they may come to you if you go through an awakening. You may have other people come to you and be really concerned about you because you are experiencing the unraveling of the mind, as I've talked about in some of my past videos, and how this is so similar to psychosis, and we don't have these structures in society to understand what's happening because we do not understand what we really are. We live in a materialist paradigm. We don't understand that we are first primarily, beyond primarily. The end is the beginning, awareness or consciousness. And so we live in this material world, and so we become concerned about the structure of our mind. And so when you invite this sort of messiness, this sort of scene, this sort of inviting all the boomerangs back to hit you in the head, life starts to look very messy from the outside. And personally, during my awakening, my house was a complete, absolute mess. And as an artist, I've experienced this. I've experienced being so in the zone, so creatively inspired on a project that I'm completely like focused in on that. And like everything within me wants to create that start to finish. And it does not see, it does not care about its surroundings. And so if this is what awakening is, it's this intense kind of focus. And another powerful metaphor is giving birth. Like if you've ever been in labor, you start to eventually, after a few hours, when the pain starts getting to the point where it's unbearable, there's this complete intense kind of focus, and people around you start to get mad at you because you can no longer respond to them. So an awakening is kind of like going into that zone. And so it's important when you're on this journey to kind of like know, kind of be aware of what happens. Not that you will have any way to resist it, but there is, I believe, an important element of putting your house in order, which means dealing with our depression, dealing with our anxiety, dealing with the just regular mundane details of our life, being really responsible, loving people. And like as a mom with kids, you had an awakening and had that kind of focus, and still like having to be able to function and be able to manage things got really interesting. But when you have, it's like a faith beyond faith, everything worked out completely for me. And when you have that faith and you also are willing to put your house in order, like I said, it's 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 beyond painless. It's this wonderful, wonderful expression of love. And just like, fall, the time when the leaves are dying on the trees, is the most spectacular time of year. Yeah, it's a complete mess and chaos. Leaves are flying around everywhere. And in the same way, in an awakening, it's like our karma and the things we've resisted. And what karma is really is when you have split yourself. Awareness is complete whole, complete non-dual. And when we split ourselves and we start to fear or try to seek security in being one thing over another, all these things kind of come back, come knocking at our door, wanting to be loved by us. And we're embarrassed to open the door because it's such a mess. So if you can get beyond that, then amazing things can unfold.